So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Now we'll begin our post-lunch session with our speaker, Mr. Kedar Deo, Managing Principal Director, Architecture from L&T Infotech Limited. As a solution architect, he assists businesses in meeting their strategic business needs by utilizing his deep technical skills, experience, and professionalism to encourage contributions, accomplishments, teamwork, and growth, resulting in customer and partner satisfaction. Solution architect who is meticulous, versatile, and technical in depth with the ability to quickly grasp, interpret, and render concepts and innovations to stakeholders in a clear, concise, and understandable manner. And he will be speaking about key lessons learned by early adopters. So now over to you, Mr. Kedar.
Thank you so much. Just want to confirm you're able to see my screen well.
Yes, I can see your screen.
All full screen, okay?
Yeah, right.
Excellent. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for my introduction. Uh, just to reintroduce, I'm Kedar Deo. I'm the enterprise architect. I'm also the CTO for experience transformation in L&T Infotech. So predominantly my role in the organization is to do the lot of transformation projects across different verticals. That's what we have an expertise in. So as part of this, we do a lot of architecture evaluation. We also do slice and dice of their existing current technology landscape, and we propose a recommendation roadmap which will help a client go from one level to our next level from the transformation perspective. Okay, so that's predominantly my role. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about the key lessons learned by the early adopters in the RPA journey, because this is the RPA summit. So I have exhaustive experience in doing the RPA for one of the very large clients. I work for multiple investment banks, UBS, Deutsche Bank. So I applied this RPA in production, and whenever the RPA journey started in this big organizations, there's always an initial hurdle, to getting to the level of maturity with the adoption of RPA tools or technologies. So today I'm going to share my lessons learned applying this RPA journey for one of the very complex business process within the investment bank, and hope it will help you also to know what are the challenges we have faced and what lessons we have learned, so that you can benefit from those lessons and make your RPA adoption much smoother in your current organization or in the current project in which you're working on. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is a very specific context from the perspective of investment banking. How, what was the challenge, and what was the journey when we started this? What are typical hurdles in terms of the automation? And everybody, whenever you introduce this RPA for the first time in the organization, everybody has a different perspective looking at the automation. So let's understand what are the different perspective each person within the organization has on the automation side, and you as a RPA leader or the RPA journey initiator, need to understand this different perspective and still try to stitch all of them together and define this RPA journey for you. All right. So I'll give you a case study on the investment bank side and the challenges, lessons learned, and I'll also share some useful links which you can take it on the ground and use it in your future reference. Okay, so let's start with the context of this. So you are already hearing this RPA summit session since morning. I already seen a lot of eminent speaker mention about the AI part of the automation, machine learning part of the automation. So in nutshell, RPA is here to stay. So robotic process automation is not going anywhere. It's a very fastest emerging technology with fantastic use cases, getting realized on the ground with the set of tools, what you can see on a screen. We have automation anywhere, we have Blue Prism, we have nice UI path and nice product contextor, so on and so forth. Everybody has their own set of RPA tools now. Even IBM has their own one. So along this, so tools is just the mechanism to implement RPA journey, but at the end, it still needs a little bit of mindset alignment from the automation perspective. So what is this mindset typically is, most of the people have a mindset saying that, it's going to take away my job. Okay. Or once the RPA is in action, we'll have a lot of attrition within our company. So these are all false mindset actually. The usage of RPA is to improve the productivity or operational efficiency of the people on the ground. So doing the same repetitive task, if we put an RPA tool or a process or a script in action, that'll free up the human capitals. So the people who are doing the same mundane tasks on a day-to-day basis, these people we can deploy it onto some another important or serious projects where their mind is more better utilized, and it's also kind of motivation for them rather than taking away their job by implementing the RPA journey. So this is not the right mindset, but the idea is to increase the efficiency and also return the measure the return of investment. Right. So ROI calculation is very vital. So how much you invest versus how much you gain after your RPA journey is, I think, a very prime important factor to consider before you start using any or start thinking about any RPA automation. Okay. Feel free to stop me in case you have any questions. Please raise the hands, or I'll also be monitoring your chat. So feel free to ask the questions in between and stop or intervene. I'm happy to get intervene. Okay, so before we start, so let's talk about the early adopters. So what different perspective each person within the organization typically have in terms of the approaching this automation process, right? So let's understand it. So typical three buckets within the organization. One is basically a business people. Second is the infrastructure, or what we call the infosec people. Uh, and then the third one is the architect people. So in any organization, you find these are the three groups or categories of the people. And of course, everybody has their own influence, or everybody has their own point of view in terms of viewing
Hello,
this RPA journey. Yeah. So
Kedar. I think I'm seeing multiple slides on the screen. Can you make it a different presentation mode? I'm not seeing
yeah,
one big slide. Yeah.
sorry. Thank you so much for that. I'll reshare it. There are two monitors, so most of the times, I'm sorry. Is it better now?
Yeah, it's a full screen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that feedback. Appreciate. So start with that. So I was just about to say that there are any organization you go and start the RPA journey, there are three buckets of the people or three categories of the people. One is from the business, second is from the infosec or infrastructure, and third one is from the architecture group. Okay, so all these three people have their different perspective or point of view in terms of approaching this RPA journey. So let's go one by one. How each person has a perspective for automation. First, starting with business. So business people say, okay, we understand business, we are the domain experts. So automation, the way we understand is moving the data from system A to system B. And there are UiPath, Blue Prism, all these tools will facilitate data transfer from one system to another system. That's what their perspective is. So from their perspective, while they understand the data moving from one system to another system in an automated way, within tool-based way, but they still think there are three steps. First is the eliminating the uh, processes, which is redundant business process. So we talk about lean. There is a lot of lean principles, a methodology in itself, which talks about eliminating the waste or using the right resources for the right thing. So they have, even business have their own perspective of saying eliminate. Okay, so eliminating certain unnecessary business processes. Next one is the optimizing the processes or introducing new processes on the way. For doing the same thing, if you can optimize the existing number of steps within that business process, I think that's the best way. And then you go and automate. Okay, so eliminate, optimize, and automate is the logical three steps from the business perspective, which business will say, okay, any automation journey you bring into in our organization, think about all these three aspects, right? Any questions, feel free to ask. I'm happy to get intervene, as I said again. Then infrastructure people comes in and say, you don't understand. You need to buy the licenses, and deploying that tools or licenses within the organization, within the infrastructure network and all that. It's again a huge task, and unless you don't underestimate that. So it's not just implementing automation scripts, or from business perspective, you need to think about the security aspects also, because a lot of investment companies or investment banks they have very tight security process where any new tool which you bring into their network or in the environment, it has to go through a rigorous security checks. And only once it's approved, they'll go and adopt that particular tool. So at the end, they still need some kind of a bot login. Okay, so having a bot login is very, very essential in the RPA journey, because it's not humans. Bot is going to log in into the system, and then it's going to do the RPA task, or it's going to run the RPA scripts for you that will automate the things. But getting the bot login itself is a tedious process in the bank, because most of the investment bank don't believe in the bot login. They will always say that it has to be a physical person sitting behind the bot, who is responsible, to execute this. Or if something goes wrong, you cannot blame bot. You have to blame a person, for example, right? So they have this kind of conservative mindset, I'll say, within the investment bank companies. So just get that bot login creation process streamlined, if at all it's not defined in that organization. Okay. uh, Invest in necessity and hardware and support staff. So once the tool is decided, it's been engaged, it's been deployed, it passed all the security checks, you started creating the business processes and automating through the tool. They'll say, we need somebody if something goes wrong while executing the script. While we have try and catch in most of the bot scripts, but at the end, somebody has to reinitiate that or restart that scripts, which you have configured and put it in production. So this people, we still need some support staff or some necessary hardware also. In case something goes wrong, you can replace one hardware and bring the bot application up and running in no time. So it's like a business continuity or disaster recovery management. So all these things is an infrastructure perspective. Last but not the least is the architecture perspective, where architects comes on board and say, hey, you know what? We have a completely different perspective looking at your RPA journey. I'm also an enterprise architect. I'm a TOGAF certified. I'm doing this transformation across multiple clients in LTI. So we always approach it in these three aspects three aspects in a completely different perspective. So first perspective is the eliminate, where we say we know your as is architecture, right? So having your as is architecture understanding. Uh, so from the architecture perspective, we also have eliminate, optimize, and automate. So in the eliminate, we say we take a as is architecture understanding of the entire enterprise landscape. Okay, and then we say we don't want to automate things. We want to retire few legacy applications right now. We want to introduce some new technology or tech modernization, or re-architect few applications to make them cloud ready, or make it microservices ready, or loose coupling between the components. So this is our eliminate process from the architecture perspective. So after we do that, then we talk about optimizing certain things. So certain applications are not API ready, certain applications are not microservices ready. There's no business process monitoring tool. There are still applications not running in Docker or containerized world in the enterprise landscape. So we say let's introduce this technologies and solutions, to optimize your enterprise architecture landscape. And after we achieve this, then we'll do automation. Okay, so it's a completely different perspective where we bring in and say, okay, let's not automate dirty processes or inefficient processes, or let's not automate the applications which have been written in a not so enterprise way. Let's re-architect them first and then introduce this automation. Okay, so this is exactly what we did in the investment bank case study, which I'm gonna give you a more deep dive. How we approach this automation journey from the architecture mindset, keeping the eliminate, optimize, and automate three steps in action, and how we achieve this ROI, return of investment, which it's pretty much justified for the bank uh, after we do all of this three steps in a right way. for the critical applications. Okay, so again, we don't want to blow up the entire application or rewrite existing all the applications. We say only for the key business applications where most of the business is dependent on those applications, and they are itself not very well written from the architecture perspective, or they are not done from business people will say they are not done in a right business process modeling perspective. There are a lot of inefficient processes, so we optimize them and then we automate. But finally, we justify ROI of even doing the eliminate and optimize as well as on the automation side. Okay. I hope I'm making things clear. So I think you will appreciate the case studies now better if you understood these three steps. So this is an investment bank case study. They are kind of early adopters into this RPA journey, where they have decided a tool called Blue Prism. And they've also already got this tool in action, and when it has already passed the security check within the bank. So the tool is there on the ground, on the server installed. Now they are thinking of which key business process to automate. So there was one business process called securitization within the bank. Again, securitization is again on a domain side. It's a very complex process within any investment bank. So bank, if you go to any bank, investment bank, they have a lot of liquidity amount or liquid cash with them. So in order to convert those liquid cash, they convert those into assets, and those assets can be tradable so that they can generate some additional revenue. So without going into the too much detail, this is what they call as a securitization process, a very complex process where your money, the liquid amount is getting converted into assets, and they are listed on a stock exchange and people trade, and the bank can generate the revenue, and they can measure how much revenue we generated from the liquid cash which bank was having before the securitization process has been initiated. Okay, so all these things involves a lot of technologies and different applications, a complex business process workflow, so to say, in terms of executing this. So, and the to our surprise, when we started approaching this business process, we found everything is manual, and it takes at least 7 hours to complete on a week basis. So it's a weekly affair, and 7 hours are needs to be dedicated with 10 people sitting on that entire business process, and over 9 days a month that has to be triggered with a manual touch points across each and every business touch points. And there's of course a tight deadline. If you miss the deadlines, bank will have a serious financial implications, of not doing this things at the right time. So obviously we'll have to have a full-time equivalence involved, in terms of putting them together and always make them available so that the bank do not suffer from the financial penalties if certain business processes are not triggered at the right time. Okay, and they also have a very expensive SaaS vendor who is actually generating revenue based on the license cost has been sold to the investment bank. So all these things were kind of pain points, maintaining the SaaS platform, and then only for that business process, they need to make sure the SaaS platform, if something goes wrong, they'll have to reach out to the SaaS vendor to fix the things in time. And then uh, so there's a lot of ad hoc processes and support required, and we'll have to make it happen in 7 hours. Otherwise, there's a huge penalty bank is going to pay to the outside government. So this was very complex. So you can see this, there's a set of source system which is pushing the data from one system to another system. Then after we push the data, then the further things get triggered, and then the actual securitization process starts, and then the report comes in, and then they'll say, okay, the securitization process has achieved its objective, and all the liquid amount is converted into tradable units. Stock exchange can see that reflected, and then we call it as a end of the day. So 11 steps involved in this, and transferring from one thing to another thing takes hell amount of time with copying the data, unzipping the data, extracting the data, making sure the data is extracted there, then running the batch processes. And at the end, there's something called Blade, which is a mainframe application, which itself was a big bottleneck, so to say, in terms of, starting our automation journey. I'll come to that in a while, but this is what I just want to give you the flavor, how complex the business process can be. Now, in order for you to automate this from the RPA perspective, it's not easy. So let's talk about that, how we are trying to approach this process from automation perspective. So first and foremost thing, when we landed as an automation experts on the ground, we say there are a lot of unknown business processes, which is itself is a very difficult thing. So if there are known business processes, fine, but there are a lot of unknown business processes where business people also not 100% clear, or no, not all the business people are available when we actually started interacting with them. We said, I just know only this part, I just know only other part, while other people may not be knowing the complete big picture. So a lot of unclarity or unknown things into the business process. And then there are sort of lots of vendors who are involved in terms of managing those systems or maintaining those applications, and that itself was making it very, very complex. And then on top of it, there's each system, whenever somebody is trying to log on to that system, it has a different access mechanism. So multiple logins, multiple passwords, no single identity management, no two-stage authentication or fingerprint authentication. Everything was completely manual. You need to remember that login. And that's where we started getting into this bot login, where we say we have a bot login approved within the bank. So the bot logins will log on to this application. That itself took three months. I'm not kidding. It took 3 months to get the bot login within the investment bank company which I worked for earlier, because of the security issues and policies. But we got that finally. We got a shared DOD, what we call as a virtual terminal, where we can have a bot login, and that DOD, can get an access to all these applications without any security concerns. And these applications also are available for the bot login to interface or do something from the automation perspective. Okay, so this was the, I mean, you will see these are the typical challenges in any business process. You think of automating it, but from the investment bank, it was slightly difficult, and the time required, to get this challenges addressed was in terms of few months, not in weeks. So that itself was a big challenge. So at the end, it was when we started approaching this architecture, it was everything was manual, multi-layer architecture, but multiple business processes or data moving from system A to system B needs to be triggered manually, copying from one thing, FTPing into another thing, extracting, archiving, unzipping, completely manual process, and then triggering the batch process after data is landed onto the system B was a nightmare. So as you can see, there are multiple layers. So there's a user management or console management layer where user logs in, or the business people logs into the mainframe systems and do something, triggering the JCL process, which is in the mainframe typically. And there's a manual login onto these applications with multiple logins and passwords to log on to different applications. And then once the data is moved, the batch process gets triggered manually. And then, as I said, output of one system is FTP'd manually to another system to consume. And then we trigger the batch jobs to pull up, to trigger the transactions and then pull up the reports, which is to Tableau. We used to generate a report to just to know how things have happened in the backend. And then there's no manual security and control. So everybody needs to authenticate with a fingerprint and a one-time password, and that's only they will get an access to the applications. And then the data was completely management of data was typically manual. Uh, so at the end of the day, it's all sequential. No way to if something goes wrong, they have no clue which person has made a mistake or not triggered that process at what point in time, because of which there's some issue now. Concurrency, working in parallel with multiple business people coming, it's not practical. So unless the first person finishes his job, then only the second person can pick it up. So it's like 24/7 kind of a business process execution. So concurrency is not possible, and there's a lot of daily, monthly, and weekly processes to be executed in time. So how do we approach this is we said, okay, this is not going to help, so let's do first elimination round. So in the elimination thing, what we said is uh, let's eliminate certain legacy applications or applications which are not actually required, or they are pretty much retired or supposed to be old and needs to be replaced with some low code platform or some better tools available in the market. So the target was the mainframes, of course, because the mainframe is very difficult to replace or eliminate, guys, but we have made a challenge to replace a mainframe or build a layer on top of mainframes, but not completely eliminating the mainframes, but building some layer on top which will help us in the automation. Okay. So next comes the optimize, where we made certain systems API ready, because unless I want to talk to them through API way, or I can just write a curl command to transfer the data from one application to another application through API way, unless the applications are API ready, I won't be able to do that. So in my optimize, we made certain applications API ready. And last, after everything is like mainframe is replaced with some another layer, API way of all accessing all the applications, then we started approaching the automation. Okay, so then we created a bot login. We did some RPA login scripts to log on, a single login, single sign on for all applications, and then uh, avoiding this manual FTPing the data through API way of exchanging the data, or event-based applications. And that's how we have progressed with the automation, and we reduced the 7 FTs for the bank for that particular month. Okay, so it's a return on investment was 7 FTs, which is a huge saving and huge frustration also for those 7 guys who are actually daily sitting and doing things manually. And it's like a daily affair for them just to execute this process or make sure the data has been passed from system A to system B in a manual way. And they were so frustrated, but they have to do it. And if something goes wrong, then they'll have to sit late to get that job done. Otherwise, they just go stretch like, till 11 o'clock or sometimes 2 a.m. in the morning. So all this frustration got completely saved by, making this eliminate, optimize, and then automate a process by, viewing from the, enterprise architecture perspective. So now in terms of the key lessons learned, what we said here is we'll have to plan ahead and plan often, as we said, understanding the business processes, or understanding which are the unknown business processes and trying to make them known in this process of automation is a key task. We need to align early with the business teams. And there's no documentation, unfortunately, in the process world. So most of the people, they know this person know this process, that person know another process, but there's no documented way, of how different processes work with each other. Okay, so that was again a challenge. So if you have that, if you don't have that, please make sure the business process at least are documented, and all the applications, the way they interact with each other is also kind of documented. And then once you know the boundary of your automation application, let's ensure you have access to all systems, whether it's through a bot way of logging in or some way to get onto the system before you start doing any simple proof of concept work in the RPA. Okay, so if you don't have access, you'll struggle getting access, and that takes itself 2 or 3 months, and that will slow down your RPA automation journey. Okay, very important thing is do ROI before you decide to start investing. Just make sure you identify the right key business process which you want to automate. Not all processes can be automated, only the key business process which will have financial impact, which there's a lot of manual intervention required. Just identify those things and only automate that. And what we learn is for the mainframes, only surface automation works, because the way the mainframe system has been written few decades before, the automation, when you put the AI or optical character recognition part of the bot into this mainframe system, they will still not recognize that. So best way is to go and click it pixel by pixel. So what we call that as a surface automation. And we found that's the only option for automating certain mainframe related business processes. And also there are a lot of Excel. So we said instead of creating a complex RPA process, let's write some macros in Excel that will also do the automation. So not that we'll have to always use the RPA tool for simple automation. You can as well use Excel macros for automation. So net, so the lessons learned by the early adapters is the process assessment methodology. Understand what are the key business processes on the ground which you want to automate. Best practices for on process selection. So that needs some interaction with the business stakeholders, and they'll tell you that this is the key business process in our overall investment bank or any domain in which you want to apply your RPA. So let's get those processes selected first and get approved that these are the only processes we want to automate. And then you go and select the right RPA tool or a platform, whether UiPath, Blue Prism, or IBM, or Power Automate, or Automate Anywhere. And then get this framework for automating a single process. So when I say single process, I mean there are multiple concurrent people using multiple processes, but let's focus on single process which runs for a single CPU, or a synchronous process and then an asynchronous process. And then typically for the synchronous process, where unless the things get finished, then only the next things can get triggered. Such processes are easy to automate using the Blue Prism or any RPA tool is my own lessons learned. And then have the, once the RPA tool is in production, then have the support and maintenance model identified, supporting staff if something goes wrong, then build those RPA capabilities internally, and then apply some more tools along with the RPA tools and document your lessons learned in the organization on your own. That will teach other people within your organization how to use this automation in more effective way in your organization. Right. So I think I already lapsed my time. So I'll just take another 2 minutes and close it. So in terms of execution approach, typically do discovery, then do the eliminate, optimize, do refactoring of components, optimize certain applications, or make it APIfication, cloudification, containerization, and then only start doing the automation. And then document this knowledge and ensure there's ongoing support. So it typically takes 36 to 39 weeks for a very complex securitization process, as I just explained you earlier in the investment bank context. So don't underestimate that efforts of doing discovery and then doing this eliminate and optimize before you automate. I think that's a key lessons learned in this overall. And then same thing is then double click here, like which are the people you need to involve. So business people are very important people to involve, ops teams, technical team, product management team, or overall program management team. Come up with the as is understanding first, and then come up with a to be architecture, and then start involving the RPA design, how you're going to model your scripts, and what are the try catch, and how you're going to run them through and on a production environment. So that's also some kind of a lessons learned in terms of approaching this as is part, and then only coming up with a to be part from the RPA perspective. And obviously, there are some organization challenges or behaviors or some mindset of the people, whether from business, infrastructure, or architecture. So collate all of them together, and then define this RPA journey in a more systematic and structured way than doing it in ad hoc and then blowing up your budget and then not able to achieve anything at the end of the day. Okay, so I think that's all I have. I thought of just sharing this case study, which will be, I think, vital for you to take it on your RPA journey moving forward. Last thing is, I just want to leave with the few useful links. I may be sharing this deck with you if you want, but there are a few other useful links I thought it'll help you to know, mostly from the Blue Prism perspective, but again, it'll give you a good insight about how do you typically approach any RPA journey. And tool is just the mechanism to implement that, but more or less the emphasis should go on to the eliminate and optimize part before you automate using any tool is the final message I just want to leave you with. I'm happy to open any questions, but thank you so much for giving me opportunity to present in this RPA Summit. And here are my coordinates. Feel free to reach out to me in future in case you have any questions on this particular topic. Thank you. Okay, thank you. There are no questions. I'm happy
Yeah,
to get contracted offline.
I suppose there aren't any
Please.
questions. So thank you so much for your valuable time, Mr. Kedar.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.